A horse rider from Leicestershire who was almost paralysed after being hit by a car says calls to lower speed limits on country roads will only work if police enforce the law. Richard CLUTTERBUCK suffered severe spinal injuries after a driver ploughed into him and his horse on a country lane.
Richard's comments come on a day when the road safety charity BRAKE called on the government to cut speed limits on rural roads to a maximum of 50 miles per hour. Phil Brewster reports.
It's now 4 years since Richard CLUTTERBUCK was hit by a car. He was out riding his horse along this country lane when two cars travelling in the opposite direction came round a slight bend in the road.
The second one slowed down, then overtook the first one, continued accelerating on the wrong side of the road, crashed into the horse I was riding, and the horse was killed. I had a fractured spine, and when my horse was thrown over the car, my wife's horse was thrown into the field and she and the horse were trapped.
The driver responsible pleaded guilty to careless driving and was given 9 points and a fine. Now the road safety charity BRAKE has done a survey of drivers and found that 1 in 3 admit to driving too fast on country lanes and regularly treat rural roads like a racetrack.
You feel like there's no traffic there, you feel like you may know the road well, but the fact is that these are real shared space environments. There are cyclists, there are walkers, there may be tractors, there may be horse riders, there may be animals jumping out unexpectedly, so you really have to be ready for anything being around the next corner.
BRAKE now want the government to lower the speed limit on rural roads from the current 60 miles an hour down to a maximum of 50. Ironically, it comes on a day when ministers announce plans to raise the speed limit for HGV lorries on single carriageways from 40 to 50 miles an hour.
Allowing drivers to speed up to 50 miles an hour, not to 60, which of course is the statutory limit for other road users on those roads, will save the industry about £10 million a year, but also reduce that frustration which we've all had of being stuck behind a lorry in a parade of traffic.
All kind of international studies show when you put speed limits up, the number of crashes, the number of casualties go up, so we'd be very concerned about that proposal.
After extensive surgery to repair his shattered spine, Richard CLUTTERBUCK has since recovered from his injuries. He agrees cutting speed levels on country lanes is a good idea, but says unless the law is backed up with action by the police, any cut in speed limits will be meaningless.
If there's no enforcement, the drivers will simply laugh all the way to the next crash. So if the speed limit is lowered, it's really not going to make any difference to most motorists, because the speed limit on these country roads, really the safe speed limit, is only around 20 or 30 miles an hour.
Richard CLUTTERBUCK says he no longer takes his horse out riding on the roads anymore as the risk is too great, and says that unless motorists are taught how to drive safely in the countryside, more accidents and deaths are inevitable. Phil Brewster, ITV News.
Well, it's a subject lots of you have been commenting on our Facebook page. And if you want to take part, then the address is facebook.com/ITV Central.
Now, the Prime Minister recently described Britain as a Christian country, but new figures show well under half of the population describe themselves as Christian.
According to research for ITV's Tonight programme, 5% of the UK population regularly go to church to worship. David Wood reports now on the challenges facing the church.
In the presence of God, Father, Son and Holy Spirit.
At one point, a traditional church wedding was only for devout Christians. But this couple barely go to church and only hide it for a day. And that's the problem for church leaders. The vicar and congregation of St Thomas's have made changes to attract more worshippers, including setting up a coffee shop and a food bank.
It provides a friendly space, and there are precious few of them, because if you go to Costa, you're expected to buy a cup of coffee. If you come here, it's free, and you'll get a welcome. You may get some food if you haven't got any food. It just provides a spirituality, a peaceful space, somewhere where people can be themselves.
And the congregation say the new approach is helping to bring the church back into the centre of the community.
It's a really good way of being neighbourly and bringing the whole community together as one.
I think for its place in the community, I think it would be a real shame if the church died out.
I think it still plays a part in people's lives. It's somewhere to turn to.
But this isn't being seen everywhere. In a country where the laws, history and traditions are rooted in Christianity, only a fifth of the population say they identify with the religion, whereas 3 decades ago it was almost half the population. But experts say Christian beliefs won't die altogether.
It's got all these ways in which it's part of our life. That's partly why it won't just die out even if people stop being Christian. But very, very importantly, Christianity, and particularly the Church of England, the national church, is embedded in all the elite institutions. So again, another reason why it's not going to disappear. Most people are going to stop identifying as Christian, but it will still be there in the social fabric of the country.
Some people, like Rachel and David, turn to the church to marry and end up joining a congregation. But with more than 1 billion people around the world not following any religion, leaders are having to find new ways of reaching out. David Wood, ITV News.
And you can see tonight Is Britain Christian here on ITV at 7:30.
Before that, the national and international news at 6:30. Alistair Stewart has the headlines and a warning that the first pictures are of children at a shelled school in Gaza.
At least 15 are killed, more than 200 injured as a UN-run school in Gaza is shelled. Many children were among the victims as Palestinian families took shelter from the fighting. The death toll is expected to rise. After the Christmas storms, power companies told to pay more in future to the victims of power cuts. And it's no go for Mo as he pulls out of the Commonwealth Games, but the first gold goes to England. Join Mary Nightingale and me at 6:30.
And let's stay with those Commonwealth Games now in Glasgow, because the Midlands has already made its mark with Oldbury athlete claiming the event's first gold medal.
Well, live to our reporter Michael SIBERT for a roundup of what else has been happening today. Michael, have you got any other medals to report for us?
Well, it's all happening as we speak, Matt, over at the velodrome here. In just the last few moments there, Cian Imadi, the cyclist from Stoke-on-Trent, has just bagged himself a silver medal in the men's team sprint. So it's all happening. You'll hear more about that on our late bulletin tonight. Elsewhere in the velodrome, Andy Tennant from Wolverhampton, he was part of the 4,000 metres team pursuit with Sir Bradley Wiggins. They, though, were quite convincingly beaten in the end in the final by the Australians. Even though Australia lost a rider halfway round, they were beaten by around 6 seconds. So disappointment for Andy Tennant, but I'm sure it'll be a medal that he cherishes nonetheless. A little bit earlier in the day, again, Jess Varnish from Birmingham. She was the only member of the track cycling team in London 2012 not to win a medal, but she got one here, a bronze. She was beaten by Anna Mears, one of the sport's greatest names, the Australian. There was also a 6th place in that competition for Solihull's Danny Khan.
So, Michael, it sounds like a good haul already, but I believe we've got more medals to come.
Yeah, we know that we're guaranteed at least 2 more medals for our Midlands athletes tonight. Kelly Edwards from Shrewsbury is competing in the 52 kilogram judo final just behind me here on the banks of the River Clyde. Similarly, Nakota Davis from Warsaw, she's competing in the final of the 57 kilogram category, but I don't think the crowd will be on her side. She faces her Scottish opponent in about an hour's time. Don't forget, you can catch up with what happens at the Commonwealth Games to our athletes, and you can see their medal winning moments online at itv.com/central.
Great stuff, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Wouldn't it be great to be up there?
Yes, and it's infectious, isn't it?
It is.
To see that and watch those medal winning moments. It's just really good. Feel good telly, I think.
Superb.